Good evening, everybody. Lee's back at you with another Wall Street Journal update. And I got 7 articles I pulled out today and a picture. I thought that sometimes pictures explain things really well, and they explain things, what's going on in our environment, society, and country. So I thought I'd start off with this great picture of, I say great, it's somber time when the pallbearers are carting out, bringing in Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, who just recently passed away, as I think most of you would know. So, and I look at this picture and I say, it's 2 women. So my immediate thing is I noticed 2 women. There's, 6 men, 2 women. And I said, that's great. But then I start thinking, I said, no, wait a minute. I mean, she did so much for women. Why isn't there 8 women carrying her? So you see what I did is I got sucked into this gender view that I see everything through a filter. And I'm starting to see everything because the media and everybody's teaching us to think that way. And why wouldn't it be all women since she did so much to support women? And so, and by the way, this is where I've talked to you before. Pictures lie to you, right? And you say, no, I saw everything. And it's the same thing with the shootings of African Americans by racist cops. You see this body camera and you say, I've seen everything. No, you don't see anything. There's a lot of facts that are missing out of a picture. So what's missing out of this picture? So, first of all, you want to say, well, who is this, family members, or is it, who is it that's carrying the casket? Well, they happen to be Supreme Court police officers, okay? And I don't know how they dress. Maybe they dress in suit, maybe they dressed it for the funeral. I don't know, but they're obviously not wearing a uniform. So they represent the police from the Supreme Court. Great. And maybe, maybe that ratio of women to men is about correct for it matches maybe the current force of the police force in the Supreme Court. So it's okay. It's not a big deal with me anyways, but I'm pointing out what our society is teaching us to do. By the way, they had 100 honorary pallbearers, and some funerals have them, and the more famous you are, you have 100 of them, and none of them will carry the casket. And those happen to be previous law clerks of Ginsburg. So I thought that was pretty neat. And so it's a great example of be careful when you see a picture, and don't immediately jump to conclusions and say, well, this should be a statement about this. Everything doesn't have to be a statement, and many things have perfectly logical reasons behind them. We just have to wait a minute. And I've got a story later on the Louisville shooting, Breonna Taylor, that speaks to that. So hang in there. So one of the interesting things is they had interviews with very little context with 10 different executives of different Silicon Valley companies. And some of them small, some of them huge. Mark Zuckerberg, by the way, is one. Tim Cook with Apple was another. But a lot of smaller and mid-sized companies too. But 10 interviews. And it was all about remote working. It says, where are we at with remote working? Have we turned a page and we're going to go to remote working full time? It's interesting. 7 of the 10 said work in the office is best for most employees. And he said, one guy was, there's part of an emerging sense behind the scenes of executives saying this is not going to be sustainable. Speaking to working at home, right? Working away, remote working. This is not going to be sustainable. And he's saying, this is an HR person who's running a company now, previous HR at Google, by the way, running a company now and saying, I'm talking to executives saying not going to be sustainable. So now all of them had an out that said, they're learning that there's a certain group of people who can work remotely. And I believe that will flesh out of this, by the way. And my observation is 70% are going to go back to the office. 30% are never going to go back to the office. And I wouldn't bank on 90% going back to the office. If I was in corporate real estate right now, I'd be very scared. Um, Quick thing about MasterCard and Dunkin' Donuts. I guess they just call themselves Dunkin' these days, don't they? They don't brag about the donuts piece. Great coffee, by the way. I love Dunkin' Coffee. Best coffee. I love that about New York. They were everywhere in New York City, more often than Starbucks, which I appreciated. But they've got this thing called Dunkin' Dash, and they're testing it with Mastercard right now. It's a touchless pay system, and basically, when you come in the store, you pre-register with your Mastercard and with Dunkin', and they know who you are by cameras and scanners. And I guess there's something you scan at the door, maybe your credit card, and then it knows you're in the store, and it watches what you pick up. In fact, there's self-pour coffee. I think that's a great idea because I like. In fact, I like Panera Bread for that reason because I like to mix strong coffee and a breakfast coffee and half. So I love self-pour coffee. And this thing just monitors you. It charges you. You walk out and you don't talk to anybody. It's another great thing I think it's coming out of the pandemic. We're getting some, as is any crisis, we learn a lot and we make a lot of changes. California is banning the sale of new gas cars by 2035. So California is a huge market. It's 11% of the U.S. market. And it's how they've got away for years on early emission controls, right? They had special emission systems in California cars and so on. So they've got away with that. And they've led for years. And they're in court right now with Trump over making emission standards for the whole country because they're such a big of the part of the market. The automakers tend to make it for California and say, everybody else, you get what California gets. So, by the way, the trucks and delivery vehicles are 2045. I think they ought to do backwards. Personally, I think it's easier to move to delivery vehicles that are on the road all day long in Los Angeles and would make a bigger difference. But it's all about image, I think. So, by the way, very interesting. Musk just a few days ago said that we need a mandate for electric vehicles. 3 days ago, I think, to be exact. And here we are. Newsom, governor of California, says, "Yep, here's our mandate." Very convenient. By the way, California right now is 6.2% of the cars in California are electric. That ratio in the U.S. is only 1.6%. So California is clearly ahead on electric. But to get from 6% to 100%, in the next 15 years is a big task. And so the question I've got, has to be, I like the vision of electric. I like the vision of getting off fossil fuels whenever we can. But what you see the difference between a liberal view and a conservative view, the liberal view takes the vision and the next step they go to is a mandate. Okay. And so they drive a mandate out and then they wait for the market to react and see what they can do. Right. And so who knows whether we're going to make it or not. They'll all pat themselves on the back and say, we had a great vision, but of course they backed it up with a mandate. If you look at the conservative view, what they do is start with this vision and then they look for market support. So they go to the market and say, can we get the market to support this? And by the way, how can we support the market? What can we do, auto companies, to get electric vehicles? In our showrooms, 100% electric vehicles in 15 years. And then maybe they'll do some beta tests. They'll look at some cities. They look at infrastructure and so on. And then the market becomes more predictable. If you look at the liberal view, the market is filled with uncertainty. These car companies, I got to tell you, this was not good news for them. This was not good news. And what are they going to do? Are they going to produce, maybe they'll produce a special car for California, and it will be small, stripped down, because they got a problem. How are poor people going to afford a car? The cheapest Tesla right now is $50,000. There's lots of people buying $15,000, $20,000 cars. What are they going to do? That's 2.5 times the price. So maybe they react wrongly and produce a car for California. So okay, California, you can. This is the car you can tell everybody to drive, and it's too small for everybody, and um, you know nobody likes it. I don't know. We'll see what happens, how they react to that market. But and the other question I've got is about the grid. So I would love for someone to take a suburb of Los Angeles, for instance, and take Santa Barbara and say, okay, Santa Barbara, we're going to electrify your whole city. So we're going to pretend like we only have electric vehicles right now. We're going to get to that point. So the infrastructure has got to be massively changed, right? You've got to have basically most houses have to have electric charging station, right? How else are you going to charge your car? You're going to sit in line at a parking lot somewhere and charge? Okay, but where are they at, and do they make money, and how do they make money, and how are you going to price it, and is there enough infrastructure? Is there enough electrical infrastructure in California to take 11% of the market of the cars in the U.S. and immediately switch them over to the electric grid? This is a state that's already having trouble with the electric grid. Remember, they're having brownouts right now because they can't keep up with hot days. What would they do when everybody? Now, of course, nighttime is typical time to charge. If it's at your house, if it's in a parking lot down the street, I don't think you're going to sit in this dark parking lot for hours charging your car. You got to think through these things, and I want to see these beta tests and these. We used to have these rooms you get in for hours. Maybe you spend all day Saturday in there. You plan this thing out and say, what do we got to have to support this kind of environment? I got to believe Governor Newsom has never had any of this. It's never happened. Okay, Mexico, 209 fewer homicides in 2009 in 2018. By the way, so homicides down slightly. Now, the good news is it's not up for Mexico. Those of you that ever travel there, and I travel frequently, the bad news is it's not down. And the new president promised to do something about that. Unless they go after the cartel, this is not going to happen. And I don't see the current government doing that right now, but we'll see what happens. So, but slightly good news if you're in Mexico. EU is going to overhaul the migrant system again. So these 27 nations, they've had lots of disputes and chaos around the migrant system because it depends on which border the person comes through. So they're a loose coalition of states, and they have to share. They don't want to share because lots of these countries, no matter what they tell you, don't want lots of these migrants, or they want special ones of the migrants, ones that are highly trained and skilled, right? So a lot of issues in Europe around that. So, and I point this out, the observation is you hear a lot of people saying the U.S. is a racist country, not allowing immigrants in. Well, the fact of the matter is we allow 1 million immigrants in a year to this country, and we consistently have done that for a long period of time. So that's what we do. And the fact of the matter, EU is really having issues with migrant issues of their own, and which border they come across, and how they get vetted. So they're going to have a 12-week detention. So they're going to put in detention all migrants coming in for 12 weeks, and then they're going to vet them, and they're going to decide whether they get them asylum or they're going to deport them. So watch that real carefully. It doesn't get as much press as the U.S. piece of it, while we bring in 1 million a year. Louisville Facts. So the 6th article here. So when this Breonna Taylor thing first happened, you heard a lot of quick news reports. And I got to tell you, what you've got to do when you start having these shootings and these crime scene things like this, is you just got to start writing facts down and back off it for a while. And you got to just say, I'm going to wait. You got to wait but people can't wait. They have to rush to judgments. And so you remember them saying this was a no-knock raid. First, one of the things on the news, no-knock raid, and we got to get rid of no-knock raid. And by the way, already before the facts in, the city council said we'll do away with no-knock raids. So what do we find out? It wasn't a no-knock raid. Well, if you want to be technical, the warrant was no-knock. So maybe somebody saw the warrant and said, it's a no-knock warrant because that's what it said. When they got there, they were told to knock on the door, and they did knock on the door, and they have witnesses, neighborhood witnesses that say they heard the cops shouting and heard them knocking on the door. So what you got to ask yourself, because people will tell you, pay attention to the facts. The problem is the facts aren't the same as the truth. And I've said this often. I keep threatening to write a book on this, and I'll see if I do it or not. But I make more promises on this than following through. But the fact of the matter was, the warrant was a no-knock raid. That was a fact. So if you go with that, say, well, they just broke the door down, rushed in. Of course, the guy in there is going to start shooting at it. But while that was a fact, it wasn't the truth. The truth was when they got there, they turned it away from a no-knock warrant to being a knock warrant. And so, by the way, the other fact you heard was that she was in bed. Well, was that a fact? Well, yeah, it was. Was it the truth? No. So it was the fact is when they started knocking, she was in bed with her boyfriend. But when the knocking started, they got out of bed and got into the hallway. When she was shot, she was not shot in bed. And by the way, that's the leap that people take, that she was in bed, and so she was shot in bed. She was not. She was shot in the hallway. She was behind her boyfriend when he was shooting at the cops. So facts, yes. Truth, you need to hang in there for a while. And by the way, they weren't there by mistake. That's the other thing you heard us. They were there by mistake. No, they had clear address. They were at the right place. You might argue whether they should have been there at all, and I think that's still to come out. I think we'll hear more about that maybe they shouldn't have been there. Reports of packages being delivered to that address and so on. It certainly is true that whole neighborhood, they by the way, that same night, there were multiple raids going on, and I think 2 more in the same street, same block, was executed. So it appears to be the neighborhood to be a real drug problem, regardless of whether this address was or not. I'm not making an assumption this address was. So, observation here is don't believe the Twitter reports. You know, in some news reports when this first comes out, because you'll find it not to be true. And by the way, don't believe pictures that you see with your own eyes, as I tried to show you earlier. You'll see video. Nobody had cop cams, you know, the cams that sit on their chest and take a picture until the process was almost done. Well, all the shooting was over, and then some other policeman came, but that was after everything was over, and then they had some camera view. So so the real question is, now that you know all this, can you change the narrative with those that believe the cops are at fault? Can you change the narrative now? Can you go back to them? And I think we've seen this before with the Floyd killing. You can go back, and you're not going to change the narrative, right? I think we all know the answer to that is you're not going to change the narrative. So moving on. The Attorney General Cameron says, and I thought this quote was pretty good from him. He says, our reaction to the truth today says what kind of society we want to be. We want to look at truth, or truth that fits our narrative. And I would say truth or facts that fit our narrative, because that's my definition between facts and truth. Facts are individual. They stand on their own, but you got to pull multiple facts together to get to the truth. That's my definition of facts. Other people will argue with me and do it very well, but that's my definition. Facts are fairly cheap. by themselves. If you want the truth, you got to put a whole bunch of them together. Look at more than the picture. So, so the green card lottery. Green card lottery, we don't pay much attention to it. Some high tech companies look at it pretty hard, but um, there's 47 sub-Saharan African countries. In 2020, there were 9.2 million applicants from sub-Saharan African countries wanting to come to the U.S. 9.2 million. In 2011, that was only 2.8 million. Okay, so that is tripled in 9 years from Africa. So, an observation that I would make: if the U.S. is a country of systemic racism, why are so many Black Africans trying to enter this country? And then you go further and you say, okay, when they enter the country, how are they doing? And what kind of immigrant are they? So, by the way, they have a 73% labor participation rate, much higher than the rest of the country. Okay, they're employed. Okay, period. That's what that says. They're employed. 59% have a college degree. The median household income is $7,000 above the average U.S. median household income. Okay, they do very well in the U.S. as a group, and so you got to ask yourself, why are they coming to the U.S. and how is it that they're doing so well? And this is if we could have an honest debate with African Americans in this country, this is one that ought to be on the table. And I still remember I had consultants working for me doing consulting work, and one was, I believe the one I worked with was from Kenya, and he was very careful in saying that he wanted me to separate himself from African Americans that have been in the United States for 20 or 30 years. He really wanted to distinct himself as, he said, I'm a different kind of person. And he made a point of it. In other words, I wasn't talking to him about this. He actually, and there was a situation going on with somebody employee at work that was not good. And he made a point, says, I'm a different kind of person than that. And when you look at the facts, they do very well here. As, by the way, Asian immigrants, they do extremely well here. So why are they coming and why are they doing so well? If you want to have an honest discussion, but by the way, we don't in this country, we don't want to have that honest discussion. So hope you enjoyed today's discussion. Hope it made you think a little bit and think a little bit after we get off the podcast. So great having you here today. Cheers. Have a great day. See you Friday.